dynamic duo from last year's NAB Convention are back again. Obviously, these two gentlemen really need no introduction to this audience, but let me first introduce Michael Powell. Following in the footsteps of his father, the Secretary of State Colin Powell, Michael's career began in the United States Army and was cut short following a near life-threatening incident. Months and months and years of mending later, Michael attended Georgetown University Law Center and began his meteoric rise in the communications industry, including a stint at the Justice Department as Chief of Staff for the Antitrust Division. He was first appointed to the FCC in 1997 as Commissioner, but his duties included the FCC's Defense Commissioner, and he was responsible for overseeing all national security emergency issues. But his days as an FCC Commissioner were numbered. Last year, President George Bush appointed him to be Chairman of the FCC, and as we all know, he received swift confirmation by the United States Senate. So please join me in welcoming the Chairman of the Federal Communications Commission, the Honorable Michael Powell. Sam Donaldson, as we all know, has been with ABC News for some 35 years. His numerous assignments have included 2 appointments as the Chief White House Correspondent, as he covered Presidents Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, and Bill Clinton. Sam's 1987 autobiography of Hold On, Mr. President, was an international bestseller. He is co-anchor of ABC News' Sunday morning show, This Week with Sam Donaldson and Cokie Roberts. But his first love, as we know, is radio. And Sam is the host of the Sam Donaldson Show, a daily 2-hour radio broadcast which features newsmaker interviews, discussion of recent events, and listener call-in segments. And you can join Sam this afternoon here at the Convention Center for a live radio broadcast, as he'll do his show from 3 o'clock until 5 o'clock live from the Convention Center's North Hall lobby. So, let's get Sam up here to do what he does best, and that's be on the air. Sam?
No deals. I want to spend the rest of our time, and then you'll tell me when that is. Going back to your opening statement and looking at the industry, you once shocked a lot of people when you were quoted as saying that you foresaw the day when over-the-air telecasting would even disappear because of the technology, because of the advances there. Talk about those bumps in the road that you see.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I think sometimes that's misinterpreted as, you don't love us.
I wonder why.
First of all, we don't love anybody, but
Seeing the voice would be sorry to hear that.
no, they count. But one of the, in a way, I think it's a challenge more than it's a sort of a disrespect. There are very serious, fundamental, foundational changes taking place in communication. They are taking place for everyone. And it is, in my opinion, one of those great historical moments of truth where you will get on this train in the right way or it will run over you. And I think that my perspective on that is it is the digital technology revolution. And every industry that's under our portfolio has been given a little slice of what it will take to prosper in that revolution, whether you be a wireless carrier, telephone carriers trying to provide advanced broadband services over DSL, wireless carriers seeking spectrum for advanced broadband services through handsets and wireless local networks, whether it be cable companies attempting to provide digital and broadband services. Every one of them is in the midst of this revolution of migration, and every one of them has been given or have earned a little piece of what it will take. The real estate for this industry is digital television transition, in my opinion. And I think that one of the reasons we're getting behind and leading it is I believe that how bright the future of the industry is has to do with how creative they are in employing that resource to be competitive and be of high value in the marketplace of the next century, in which consumers will have different kinds of expectations about the technology. You know, I give a speech sometimes to talk about the 3 acts of media. Just quick review. I'm teaching. Quick review. Act 1, in my opinion, which was what some people call the golden era of television, driven by the technology. Broadcast, one to many. We all sit down at the same hour and watch Walter Cronkite, and we share that as a community. In many ways, that prospered preeminently for a while. Then kind of cable and the disrupting influence of more diversity through multi-channel provision of services, ever more parochial interests being programmed to. I think there was a chapter in which consumers were beginning to aggregate their interests around limited kinds of programming. So if you're Lowry and you really love fishing, I mean, there are channels you can do nothing but watch that all day long. Why, I don't know, but you can. You can in America today watch bass fishing shows for 24 hours on some medium. And I think that was the sort of period. And I think that what the internet and digital is introducing is penultimate diversity, right? Individual, tailored, programmed interests. And as I say in the speech, you know the lexicon, my Yahoo, my Amazon, my everything. The threats of TiVo are a reflection of consumers exploring individualized program choices for them. Not even their family necessarily, not their neighbors, not their community. That is a challenge to a medium whose hallmark is one to many. But I don't think that it's an insurmountable one. I think it's one in which creative use of digital television and digital spectrum are going to provide a valuable alternative to consumers. But I think if we're not creative, that it's just sort of pretty picture TV showing the same fare the same way. I think that it will be challenging to be competitive with other services that are going to offer more flexibility in that. And so I would interpret what I say as watching the factual trends and pointing to them as warning signs and then taking it as a challenge of what this industry will wrestle with.
But it seems to me you're saying we have to program, and what we are, programmers, in one way or the other, differently, or at least in a way that recognizes that people will pick and choose for themselves rather than sit down. So let me ask you this question about the body politic in the news and information field. Tonight, the people will still watch I Will Peter Jennings, World News Tonight, or any of the other great broadcasts. And they may be very interested in the first story, but not the second story. But they're going to stay for the third story. They'll get some of the second story. If, under what you foresee, we all just make our individual choices, we will not watch the second story at all. But there may be information there that in the years ahead we wish we had. Any problem? Is it dumbing down?
First of all, is there anything one can do about that? History does move on, and people do change their approaches to things and information. And the family of today operates in a very different way than the family of 300 years ago. Where we are at certain times. I think what's happening is that the proliferation of complex society means that more things compete for an individual's attention. But a human being still is a human being and only has 24 hours in a day. A human being still has to take their children to their seemingly hundreds of activities. Distances still take time. There are these sort of fundamental limitations, but there are these ever-increasing complex demands for our time and our attention. And so it's about coming out of the noise to grab somebody. And I think what consumers in their frustrated lives are saying is, I have to have some command because of my complex time and my complex schedule to fit things in that are conducive to my lifestyle. And that is relatively dynamic. And while you might love for me to just always sit down and watch all the stories of Peter Jennings, my son has piano at 7. And I got to be on, I'm in the minivan at that hour period. Now you can say, well, they're just gone. Or we can say, put something in that car. Put something on that belt loop or in that purse that keep the news coming in those moments of people's transition. And I think what's going to happen is it's going to be very hard for us to find a clean way to put our hands around the way the space looks, because it'll be more dynamic. People might get the second story, Sam, but they might watch the first story TV and they pick up parts of the second story on their Ring device as they're heading out to the store. Or they will hear a little bit about it in the teaser and they'll come home at late at night and go on your website and get the rest of the story. But I think that it will be much more dynamic. People will access news and information in many more dynamic ways. It'll be very, very hard to fix on where they're getting their key sources of information. The other thing I want to say, and this is in defense of my fellow Americans, I don't buy any of this stuff that Americans are dumbed down, they don't pay attention, they don't know news. I have watched in my adult life now some of the most important historical events in the history of this country. The most contested presidential election ever. I have learned more about the Electoral College, litigation in the Supreme Court, politics, voting machines, ballots, punched ballots, than I ever learned in any school that I ever went to, and that was brought to me by the media. And it was brought to me through interesting programs of dynamic nature, and I think that the country tuned in. I think even the young people who we wrote off, including my children, paid attention, found ways to pay attention, and involved themselves in a major news event. So my feeling at some level is when they need to be, and when they have to be, Americans are ready and willing and able to engage in the events of the day and make their preferences informed and known to their legislatures. And they did that in the election. They did that in the crisis of 9/11. And I think that it's, one of the blessings of America is that when you're ready to tune out, you can. So maybe they don't watch your second story. You better find a more compelling way to give them.
On election night. I'll pass your advice on to Peter when I see it. And of course, on election night, you learn several different things depending on which moment of the evening you were watching. But I think you'll overcome that. Is this, when you talk about the children, are we talking about something that's generational? Kids today know so many things that I don't know today, and yet they don't know some things. I know who Joseph Stalin was. I ask interns who come from bright colleges, and half of them don't know. Does it matter?
I think it matters, but the current generation always assumes that the changes going on in the younger generation, because they're different than the way we access things, mean that they're worse or more problematic. I mean, I think if you went back at any period in history in the 50s or the 60s, they're all worrying about the younger generation and the way they do things. And the world didn't come to an end when they rose into adulthood. The interesting thing is, if you get to the world of pervasive information, a lot does change. You and I talked about this, about your interns don't know about Stalin, but 5 minutes later they'll come back with you with more about Stalin than you ever could have when you were their age. Because they'll go to Google and they'll have more on Stalin in 5 minutes than it would have taken me weeks in the library to figure out. I don't know what the impacts are going to be, but my children think everything is found by Google. We don't own any World Book. When I was a kid, it was a big day. My parents bought the World Book Encyclopedia. And I sat over in the living room and we pulled them down and looked things up. We don't do anything like that at our house anymore. Jeff, what's this? Let me go find out. And it's got graphics and pictures and moving video clips and and they think that's wonderful.
And they do things. We were talking about it, and I love the story. I think that people here this morning would love to hear it. When you went in and found your son's looking at the ceiling.
They do that sometimes.
Yeah, but what they were actually doing.
Yeah, I was telling Sam the story. My children fascinated me the other day because they were laying on bed looking at the ceiling, and I walked in and said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm watching a movie." And I said, "What? What are you watching a movie?" I'm watching Meet the Parents. And I said, "Well, how are you doing that?" "Well, I've memorized a couple movies." And I said, "No, you haven't." And he starts to do the movie. I do not exaggerate. I let him go for 35 minutes. He had every single line of the movie. And so I said, "Well, does your brother do that?" "Yeah, but he likes television episodes better. He's memorized 7 episodes of SpongeBob SquarePants." So I said, "Brian, do you really?" And he said, "Oh yeah," and he does a whole episode. And then my son said something telling me, because I was just blown away by not only their memory capacity. By the way, if you think TiVo's a threat, this is a real threat. These kids just can watch it once and they don't ever have to. And my son said something to me, the older one said, you know, Dad, I can do that for things that I hear or see. I can't do it off paper. But I thought was extraordinarily telling to me about the way we try to teach him, where he struggles every night with those books and that paper, because that's our generation's way of teaching a child. But these children are growing in a media environment, in an entertainment, in a visual and audio environment, that means that they are actually absorbing information in very different ways. And I don't know if that's good or bad. I mean, part of me worries that they don't have the patience and the discipline to work the world's great problems and the books that are valuable. On the other hand, I don't know where they get this brilliant visual dimensional processing. That, have you watched your child play a PlayStation 2 game? I don't understand how they can keep track of the millions of variations that are going on. I think that's last year. There's something different going on there in their media-rich digital environment. And as you and I said, I don't know whether that mind will be more capable of solving the cure to cancer or not. But I know that they have eyes that see things that go over my head and my generation.
Okay, final question here. You have been in the office now, what, a year and 3 or 4 months?
Is that all?
You've come from the Mercedes divide through the...
You told me you wouldn't say that.
I said I wouldn't ask it. I didn't say I wouldn't say it. You have to pay attention, sir. From the Mercedes divide through the real Slim Shady to the point where the kids are playing movies in their minds. You like your job?
I love my job. We should all love our jobs. There's a quote I'm trying to remember that I sent. There's nothing better than to be involved in the great moments of one's day. And all of us are involved in the great moments of our day. This is one of the great socioeconomic revolutions of history. And it is not corny to say it is the successor to the Industrial Revolution. It is the digital information revolution, and all of us have a front row seat to watch and be involved in it. And when I'm older and my kids run Sony and cure cancer with their they're at work, caring, watching. We're going to see the fruits of what we did. We see them every day. I mean, I've been there 5 years, and I'm still amazed at how many things I see that when I first started, we were just talking about. And they're now real and they're out there. And I think in another 20 years, 30 years, I'm going to look back and we're going to look back and say, look at how much the world has changed, the consequence of what we did or tried to do, and what everyone in this room does and tries to do. So I'm blessed and thankful and privileged to have it, and I enjoy it greatly.
Thank you, Chairman.
I didn't hear what you had to say.
Hi, Cutting Edge.
What's your name?
Chris Trula.
And you're with How Stuff Works?
Yes, I am. I'm VP of Business Development for How Stuff Works.
Very popular website.
Yes, yes it is. It's got 3.5 million unique users a month.
Wow.
Yeah.
Heavy numbers.
Yes, indeed. And they're growing all the time.
Thanks a lot for joining us on The Cutting Edge.
Thank you very much for having me.
So you're going to work with the media basically to help them make that transition.
Absolutely. Well, there's a combination of things that have to be done. Obviously, the broadcasters are doing their part, but interface products, television, set-top boxes, a lot of other assets that need to be brought to bear to bring HD and digital television in general to the market.
You're not unfamiliar with this technology, are you? You kind of had some experience in the technology field prior to, haven't you?
Well, I did. I came out of the hardware side and spent a lot of years in the television industry, if you will, by supporting it in my trade association. And our association, along with some of the broadcasters, did the model station for high definition. So this is something where we're now seeing the fruit of a lot of years of work.
Now listen, the 48th Congressional District, you got people there that are going to be benefiting by your attendance here today?
I think so. I think that as we go from an analog age in which all you get is a television signal to a digital age in which there's just huge amounts of information and even demand services, everyone in America and in the 48th Congressional District will see the benefits.
Why don't you help us out? Do you serve on any of the committees relating to these things?
I do. I serve on the Judiciary Committee, which it and Energy and Commerce spend a lot of time dealing with these issues.
One last question for you, sir. There's a lot of talk about legislation that may affect this industry. What do you see on the horizon, if you can?
Well, I do see the need for either cooperation or legislation, one of which would lead to making sure that as digital is rolled out by the broadcasters, digital ready is more available by all the other producers of products.
All right, last question. I'm sorry, I got to ask one more. What about these big mergers with EchoStar and DirecTV and all of that? When you on the committee that you serve on particularly would look at these sorts of things?
We do. As a matter of fact, our committee's chairman, Jim Sensenbrenner, is here specifically looking at and evaluating that because competition is the obligation of the Judiciary Committee, and we are looking with a very, very skeptical eye to the merger.
Congressman Darrell Issa from the 48th Congressional District of California, thank you so much, sir.
Sure thing, Ron.
Want to get to bed early last night? No. Me neither. Well, I'm really pleased to be with the NAB members of Congress. Some time ago, I was speaking to Senator John McCain, and I said, Senator, who are the most effective lobbyists in Washington? He said, oh, without a doubt, it's not even close. The NAB. Damn it.
you understand what all that goes. So I want to introduce a panel now. The NAB is so organized. This is the pool among you guys. And so to Conrad Burns, there's a lot of stuff in here. You know you got in so much trouble in high school. What Grants know about this?
I didn't fish.
Senator Burns has been a long-time friend of NAB. He is one of the key players on broadcasting issues. He's the third-ranking Republican in the Senate Commerce Committee, and he's the ranking member of the Communications Subcommittee. Senator is a broadcaster himself. For short stint in the Supreme Court, he created the Northern Ag Network, which ultimately served 31 radio and 6 TV stations in Montana and Wyoming. Senator Burns is the first Republican senator to be re-elected by Montanans, and he's done it twice. He's talked to me right a good time. Congressman Sensenbrenner, as this is his first NAB conference, we're very pleased to have him as the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, F. James Sensenbrenner from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Actually, just kind of north of Milwaukee, isn't it? First elected in 1978, he is one of the most senior Republicans in the House. As chairman of the committee, he plays the singularly most important role in issues from copyright to streaming to Viola. His committee oversees our relationship with a number of other industries, including the recording industry. Chairman should give us an idea of the committee's priorities, and particularly what this Congress has in store for any copyright legislation. Welcome to you. Representative Richard Burr, NAB is delighted to have with us as the bipartisan Green-Burr-Green duo who successfully stripped the Torricelli language from the campaign reform bill. That was very popular. The Republican half of that dynamic duo was Congressman Richard Burr of North Carolina. As Vice Chairman of the House Committee on Energy and Commerce, he is Chairman of the Cozan's hand-picked go-to guy on most of the tough issues. Congressman Burr grew up in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and played strong safety for the Wake Forest football team, the Deacon Deacons. And it's never easy playing strong safety for the Deacon Deacons. They're always running right over you. Prior to his arrival in Congress in 1994, Congressman Burr was a successful business executive for appliances. Now let's welcome the other half of our dream team, Houston, Texas, Congressman Gene Green. When he is not dealing with broadcasting issues, from the seat on the Telecommunications Subcommittee, Congressman Green has been active in Congress on education, health care, and job training issues. With the NCAA fresh in our minds, we should also note that, like the other half of Burr Green, Gene Green is also an athlete. In the House Gym Basketball League, his devastating three-point shot disappeared. Congressman Darrell Issa, elected in 2000, hails from Orange County, California. Congressman Darrell Issa sits on the House Subcommittee on Courts and Intellectual Property. That's the subcommittee that will have first cut at any copyright and internet streaming legislation. Before his involvement in politics, Congressman Issa was a successful businessman. He headed up Directed Electronics, and under his leadership became the world's largest manufacturer of vehicle security systems, including the popular Viper system. From there, he became active in the high-tech industry, eventually serving as chairman of the Consumer Electronics Association. Congressman Joy Verdanovich, the first full-time winemaker to serve in the House of Representatives. Congressman Joy Verdanovich joins us from Fresno, California, and he's going to tell me where I can buy his wine in Washington, D.C. after we get back home. Following his 1994 arrival in the House, his peers elected Congressman Verdanovich president of the incoming Republican class, a sign of respect from his colleagues. In 2001, Congressman Verdanovich joined the House Energy and Commerce Committee, where he has taken an active role in communications issues. Congressman Lee Terry. He has been interested in politics for some time. He's from Omaha, Nebraska. His first taste when his father, a TV anchorman on the ABC affiliate of Omaha, ran for the House in 1976. Congressman Terry serves in the House Telecommunications Subcommittee, and he's been intimately involved in all the communication policy issues affecting our industry. Congressman Greg Walden. Our panel today is anchored by the only active broadcaster in Congress. From Hood River, Oregon, Congressman Walden grew up in the radio business. In 1986, he bought a group of 4 stations from his father. He and his wife, Mylene, are currently building a 5th. He's always been active in the industry. He's former chairman of the Broadcast Industry's Legislative Liaison Committee for Oregon, and he's been involved in NAB's political action to TARP Act. Having joined the House Commerce Committee this past year, Greg Bowman, Chairman Cruzen, was key resource for radio issues. Will you join me in welcoming our very esteemed panel? Okay, Senator Burns, let me ask you about something that is local. You've expressed strong concerns about the potential merger of EchoStar and DirecTV. First, do you think the merger will go through? And second, considering the high percentage of Montanans who subscribe to DBS, how will the merger affect rural consumers?
Well, I think it affects us a lot. In fact, I want to maintain a pretty keen competition not only in that area, but also and they being able to compete with the wired cable. I think that's very, very important. There's no doubt about it that it's going to have an impact on rural areas. We're the largest per capita user of DBS and the other in our state. But I'll tell you what, I'm still saying local to local is very important to us. Our ability for our local televisions, especially in our DMAs, have to be able to get out, and satellite in Montana is the only thing we have left in order to reach those remote areas.
John, if I can butt in at this point, the Judiciary Committee has got jurisdiction over the antitrust laws. And we had a hearing late last year on the EchoStar DBS merger, where I believe there were bipartisan expressions of concern that this merger, if it goes through, will end up having a single corporation control about 90% of the total satellite market. That obviously is monopolistic in nature, and the consumers will end up suffering as a result of it. Particularly those consumers who do not have access to cable and have to rely almost exclusively on satellite TV to get a good signal. My committee is extremely concerned about this proposed merger. During the course of the hearing, it was pointed out that before the merger agreement was signed, certain court filings of EchoStar expressed a similar concern during previous litigation and previous regulatory proceedings. I'm for competition in everything because competition is what has made this country great, and the fair application of the antitrust laws is a way to ensure that the private sector does provide competition. And I think that's the way we ought to go about making that guarantee to the people that you serve and the people that you represent.
Chairman, let's try another issue. The Recording Industry Association of America and local broadcasters negotiated a marketplace agreement to resolve a long-simmering dispute over radio station royalties to record labels for streaming their signal over the internet. The Copyright Office rejected that agreement and imposed a new royalty system that has led to virtually every free radio station removing their signal from the internet. Was that the intent of Congress when they passed the Digital Millennium Copyright Act?
The answer to that question is no. The Digital Millennium Copyright Act was designed to use digital means of transmission of signals as widely as possible. And it is regrettable, in my opinion, that the Copyright Office rejected the agreement that had been made. There has been some litigation that has been going on, and once the litigation and regulatory processes are concluded, the Courts and Intellectual Property Subcommittee of the Judiciary Committee will review how those issues have been resolved, either judicially or in the Copyright Office, and perhaps will recommend some legislation. Now, having said that, if you look at the history of both the Senate and House Judiciary Committees, throughout the years, they have been very, very partial to copyright owners and the type of property that those owners want to protect. I think I'm the first chairman of the full Judiciary Committee that has had an open mind because I was able to pass a music licensing reform bill in 1998 over the strenuous objections of Hollywood and Nashville and a lot of the other copyright owners, and many of the broadcasters ended up having the consumers of your signals in bars and restaurants be relieved of having to pay royalties. I think that the recording industry ought to take a page out of what the movie industry did 20 years ago when VCRs became affordable. started getting them. When the VCRs first came on the market, you know, the movie industries wanted to put a tax on them, that didn't fly. And then they wanted to put a $3 a tape tax on blank tape, and that didn't fly. And then they sat down and they figured out how to make more money out of the technology. So they released the films in the theaters first, you know, then they go and have some type of release of the blockbusters, then they syndicate them on free TV, then they allow people to buy their favorite tapes and own them themselves from a video store like Blockbuster, and then they end up on pay TV. You know, so the movie industry ended up getting several kicks at the cat. Now the recording industry, if it was well advised, you know, would end up figuring out how to use the technology to make more money for themselves, rather than fighting every expansion of their labels on a new medium. And I have advised them of that. I had told them the same thing I told you. I think there's a more receptive audience here than over there. It's a question of whether they want to spend all of their royalties and lawyers' fees making representations to copyright offices in the court, or whether they want to make more money to stick in the pockets of the people who produce these recordings. That's their decision. It isn't ours.
We're in a cycle in Washington where a lot of times you have very little time to prepare for an issue because it comes up one night and it's being taken up the next day. In this particular case, NAB was able to pick up the phone and call a lot of people in this room and have you contact your members of Congress. That is still the most effective way to have an effect on the legislative process in Washington is when they hear from their constituents. So for that, we thank you.
No, I think wasn't that more of a case though of making a business issue on this thing? Because I think the general public has the idea that airtime is free time, and the industry needs to make that case. And I think once you cast it as you know, as almost a form of a tax on the broadcasting industry, then I think you need to case that way.
I think the other thing we have to watch, the backers of campaign finance reform have now announced their next cause of crusade is free time for broadcasters. And so all the forces that were behind the Kane Feingold before are now going to come to our industry, your industry, and demanding free time now instead of just the Torricelli type amendment. So be ready for that when it's next.
Probably our bigger challenge is that we use more than 5 minutes each for the overall bill when it passed. And when it's all said and done, undoing in courts probably some of the damages that we as a body, not me personally, or I think most people here voted against campaign finance reform, but the fact is that it's a bad piece of legislation. And it will, in fact, come back to bite everyone, this industry included. You know, I can make the case as a businessman, if we're going to give up the First Amendment rights to some, well then every time you talk about a candidate, even in a news cycle, in fact, you better be spending hard money, meaning you can't expense it. I could make the case that you couldn't expense talking about candidates. And what would that do? Well, that would be real easy. You just gag rule it. You wouldn't talk about candidates in the media. You wouldn't report on it. You wouldn't do it, and you'd get less information. And yet we as a body voted a really bad law in an effort to silence certain other groups. And so as much as I came here thrilled that Torricelli didn't happen, because at least it wasn't that step in the wrong direction, I think your industry needs to take a lead to recognize that any time you start beating on the unfettered rights of people to express themselves, you're beating on your industry sooner or later. And hopefully this industry will be a champion for reform so that in fact it doesn't do some of the damage it's about to do if enacted.
John, I voted for campaign finance reform. And I don't think we're going to hell in a handbasket with it, because I've been in office 30 years, state rep, state senator, and Congress, and voted for campaign finance reform, whether it be in the Texas legislature and Congress. It is not going to be the end of the world or the panacea that the folks think it will be. But I do think that if their next step is to talk about the free time, and I would encourage you, because I have stations in Houston who do that, who give candidates. Now, it's frustrating, though, if you have a Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, Socialist, Worker, and whatever, to have that kind of time. But a minute or two after the news, as long as we have Nightline or whatever else is happening, but something like that helps, and it takes the wind out of their sails. And so I can't encourage you too much to make that decision, particularly on federal offices. But that's a decision you can make, and it takes the wind out of the sails of the folks who do want to take part of which your asset is, and give it to someone. That ought to be your decision.
Question for Congressman Issa. The broadcast industry is currently trying to mandate tuner equipment and high-definition TV sets, something the Consumer Electronics Association has resisted. As a former chairman of the CEA, what advice do you have for broadcasters on this issue?
You know, Gary Shapiro over here and I were just talking about that. It seemed to occupy our breakfast. You know, you already have a mandate as an industry to turn back in analog. And as long as there's going to be a mandate to you turn back in bandwidth, then there has to be some form of cooperation. I don't happen to favor, and I don't think it's because I came out of an industry because I didn't make TVs, but I think I understand that there are other ways besides this body mandating that it could work, not the least of which is, to be honest, there's the chicken or the egg. It's already sort of working. Where we have a challenge, and I think it's a legitimate challenge, is to recognize, and I hope Congress all recognizes, and I hope Gary Shapiro, my dear friend of more than a decade, recognizes that digital TV didn't roll out, especially the high definition, with the kind of consumer demand that we had hoped for. And it wasn't just price point, it's an education process. If you haven't really sat down and looked at a high definition signal and watched a good movie on it, or a sports event, you don't appreciate it. That recognition is one that we in Congress have to make, which is the consumer has a right to say, I don't want it on your timetable, I want it on my timetable. And as long as the industry is producing and making available, and making available with the right pricing, digital tuners in their televisions, and of course in some cases monitors separate, always has been, then I think they're doing their part, and we as a Congress need to look at our analog take-back provision and timeline and say, is it realistic, not in light of whether you're rolling out, because you have to roll out, but is it realistic in light of actual consumer demand? And that's one of our challenges. I personally think it's going to accelerate. I remember when DVD rolled out, and it kind of fizzled for a little while, about 8 months, right, more or less, Gary, and we went home and I got another laser disc. How many of you own laser discs? Don't admit it.
Let me follow up on what the congressman said. I can remember about 10 years ago, we sat in this very facility at Consumer Electronics and talked about the government setting standards for high-definition television. We can remember that. And there was a lot of us opposed that because once government sets the standards, we are frozen in that technology for the next 10 years.
We had a couple of questions earlier about will there be hearings on things relating to the broadcast industry, like getting rid of the 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time Network news. The answer is probably there will be hearings, because if we have hearings on a broadcast issue, then all the TV cameras are going to show up and we get our mugs on TV. And if you don't want to have hearings ad infinitum on issues affecting your industry, keep the TV cameras at home, and then we'll figure out something else to put our face on the TV.
We're very good at that, but I will tell you, we were talking about Enron a little while ago. The first negative thing that you've seen in public policy with regard to Enron was campaign finance. I say that tipped the vote in the Senate. More than anything else was this Enron thing, and everybody was afraid to touch it. I'm afraid that where can Enron go in this country as of the last 2 or 3 months? Where can they go to try those people? Where are they going to get a fair trial? I don't know where they have to go. But I'm saying that I think we were derelict in our duties whenever we started going out there and just going after people and not knowing what they were, just like an old blue-eyed horse. We started jumping at shadows. And by gosh, and it makes it pretty tough for corporate America, especially the people who are responsible in corporate America. It even makes it tough for them. And to reestablish that is going to be a monumental exercise.
I don't know what else to do beyond that.
Congressman Berman is looking into trying to take Clear Channel through their subsidiary, CC.com, is steering their artists away from radio stations that aren't affiliated with Clear Channel, and not giving them promotional tickets and urging artists not to interview with other stations. What's your perspective?
Well, I think the whole issue of vertical integration, when you own the programming that a lot of other stations relied upon, you buy that out, and then you own the majority of the stations in the market and all the way on through, makes it very, very difficult for anybody to compete. And at some point, you're stepping into the bounds of monopolism. And so I really think that's something we've got to keep an eye on. Understanding that there are bounds, obviously, in which you can operate legitimately. But at some point, you cross over and deny stations the ability to get the programming that used to be available or to get access to talent. You really are engaging in a predatory practice. I'm not saying that about Clear Channel because I don't know all the details there. But I'm just saying in general terms, you see this occur in other companies, and the FTC has stepped in and caused changes to occur in the courts now.
Thank you, Congressman.
Congressman, one question on campaign finance reform. What would be your position about public access? In other words, you know, there's always this demand for political advertisement.
I think in most cases, in fact, I was going to ask this group, how many of you offer free time to candidates? Because I think what you're going to find is in one venue or another, nearly all of us in the broadcast industry offer up some form of free time, whether it's during talk shows or news interviews that are set aside during election years for expanded coverage, or in many cases, I know with the television stations in my state, they offer candidates a free shot at the microphone and the camera for a minute or two to give their statements, and then those are played over time. I think this industry has been very responsible in covering candidates and offering free time, and I would say more responsible than any other medium out there in terms of providing candidates with access to their audiences. And so I think we're doing our part. I think this concept that somehow we ought to do even more is misplaced.
Well, I'm just concerned about the millions of dollars that are collected each year for each candidate just for the commercial aspects of the commercial television. What I was suggesting in that question was in public access, where you could actually, not commercial television, not your majors, but in the actual public access market, would you be willing to have all candidates, as they do in England, just get all of their advertisements on those types of stations rather than on commercial television?
No, I'm not going to do that because I think we have a different system than they have in England. We have far more diversity in the marketplace, far more stations. We have a whole different system, and I'm not prepared to go to a European system or a Russian system or any other. I think our system works, and I think it's worked effectively for generations. And the point is, if you save me as a candidate money, I'm going to go spend it somewhere else. You give me free radio and television time, then I don't know of a candidate out there that isn't going to go ramp up their direct mail, phone banks, newspaper, and whatever else they can spend it on. It's a matter of just shifting. And so I think to think that by giving free time somewhere is going to somehow solve all the ills of a campaign and make everybody sing kumbaya and be nice to each other is false.
Well, last question, Congressman, and that is, because of the convergence here at NAB, the question is, there are a variety of websites who would be able to do exactly what we're talking about as far as public access, and that's offering political candidates lots of time on websites, which are going to be convergent onto television markets eventually.
I don't, if you're talking about banning candidates the opportunity to buy time on commercial television, then I don't support that at all. And I don't think the web has gotten near the audience penetration that my local affiliates or the cable station in my district have gotten. So I wouldn't be in favor of that. I can start my own website and go promote it. I can get access to other websites per se, but that is not going to replace commercial radio and television by any stretch of the imagination.
Thank Thank you so much, Congressman. Really appreciate it. Thank you, sir. One question that wasn't broached on the dais was related to campaign finance reform and the millions and millions of dollars that are spent on television advertising every year in every election cycle. There's some talk about having it all go onto public access and having free time on public access and everything throughout the country. What's your position on that?
Well, I think that's an idea that's being discussed, office, state office, local office, on both national campaigns on network, but also our local campaigns in our communities. I would encourage the broadcasters to create times for debate between opponents, particularly in a general election. But again, I think you'll never. I had debates, but I also bought time during campaigns, so I think you'll always have that. And again, that's part of a free society.
Well, they don't have that in Europe or in England or in Germany or other places. Are those not free societies?
Well, they're free societies, but again, there are different ways you can address it. In the United States, obviously, we have our democracy just like Great Britain. But I represent my district in Great Britain. You're assigned to a district to represent if you're in the Labor Party, Conservative, or whatever. So there are a lot of changes. You can have lots of wrinkles to democracy and still have democracy. I think we can still have paid campaign ads and still have a very vibrant democracy. In fact, I think it's shown throughout the world we can do that.
Congressman, you're awesome. Thank you so much.
It's like Tony Blair meeting with Bin Laden. So 75% support from his people. If President Bush didn't have 80% support to go into Afghanistan and do what he did, there is no way in the world. If he had 30%, there's no way Bush would have gotten into Afghanistan. This is a country, and the leader of the country says what his people tell him to do.
Okay, Victor, now I'm going to interrupt you.
Go ahead.
If you're sitting in Jerusalem and your family is being killed by people from the West Bank, you would do exactly what Prime Minister Sharon is doing.
Well, then I'll tell you what.
Hold on, Victor. Here in the United States, think about the strategic interest of this country. Yes, we want to see Israeli lives saved.
No, that's not
but we want to see Palestinian lives saved also.
Absolutely.
And also we want our interest in the Middle East. Does the word oil mean anything to you? So far, Saudi Arabia and Kuwait have said they will not join any oil boycott of the world supply. But the effort to fight the war on terrorism needs moderate Arab nation support, does it not? Should we just forget that?
I disagree with you on that is that you are telling me to sell my soul for principle.
No. But for 6 days now, there has not. That may be because the Israeli armed forces have rooted them out. For whatever the reason, though, this kind of pause must be seized on to try to disengage the forces.
That the heart should come on both, not just Sharon. That there is some punishment on Arafat as well, not just Sharon to get out.
Well, we're back in Las Vegas again, Anna, and this time for the National Association of Broadcasters. Probably the biggest media event in the entire year. We got to see Sam Donaldson this morning. What'd you think of it?
Well, I liked the FCC Chairman Powell. He did he answered the questions pretty good, but the questions weren't as hard as they could have been by Donaldson.
Didn't think he asked strong enough questions. Is that what you're saying?
No, they were a little too friendly.
Well, there's the big talk here for this convention is that Tom Brokaw and Peter Jennings and Dan Rather are all out of there. They're just saying that the nightly network news is going to go away, just like it's not going to happen anymore. What do you think of that?
should keep at least one nightly news show. Maybe we don't need all three of them at the same time, but if they keep one, they have to change the format completely and put maybe a co-anchor and make it that you take turns on having the anchor, and female anchor that would be real colorful, like late Barbara Olson kind of type of person, something that would really spunk up the show.
So you think it's kind of draggy? Nightly news for the new generation, they can't quite relate to these people that are on television at 6 o'clock news anymore. Is that it? Was that what you're basically saying?
Well, they need to bring other people in from other generations as well, so more people can relate to the news, the newscasters.
Now, we got to go to that one event with all the congressmen for the first day, and that was a pretty exciting event. John Cochran, ABC anchor, did a fabulous job, I think, of monitoring that show.
Yeah, the questions were a lot more substantive in that show. I like that better as well.
Well, for the people that haven't been to the National Association of Broadcasters event in their lives, what would you put it? How would you say? What do you think all these people from all over the country and all over the world come here for?
Well, a lot of them are probably looking for jobs, and a lot of them are selling their products, and the rest of them are just interested to find out what's going to happen with the media business overall.
Yeah, that was very interesting. We got to talk to Joe Flannery from CBS and the future of networks and broadcasting, all this new media that's out here, including the cutting edge, a lot of different websites, a lot of different types of digital media, and all these buzzwords that all come out to mean one thing, that the markets are going to get smaller. A lot of different people are going to watch different types of shows, and people are going to have a lot more choice in what they get to watch on television anymore.
They're competing for a big market of people, and they have to have very entertaining programming and substantive information. Otherwise, people aren't going to put on their channels.
Yeah, I think, the big talk, of course, from the congressional point of view was that the quality of programming that's out and available is not that good right now, and we walked around and saw that job fair, and they're really looking for quality people, and it's hard to find good quality journalists out there. That's what they're saying.
They're just going in a completely different direction. You have to focus more on the internet and save a lot of money and cut down on costs and all that things.
Well, I think that's about it from Las Vegas and the National Associations of Broadcasters show. We had a good time while we were here. It's a little overcast today, but it's pretty hot generally all the way through, though. I guess that's from the Cutting Edge of Talk Show. It's a wrap. Yeah, it's a wrap. Oh no! This is really cutting edge.